The Third World will defeat the First World through global people's war. Socialism will be imposed on former First Worlders by a joint dictatorship of the proletariat of the exploited nations over these enemy populations. Some of the defeated enemy will have to be relocated and dispersed for the safety of the world majority. All of the defeated enemy will require extensive political remolding if they are to rejoin the world community. They will have to be taught proletarian right from wrong. Allyn Rickett was an American espionage agent in revolutionary China. He spent 4 years in Chinese prison undergoing thought reform and was eventually able to recognize his activities against the Chinese people as wrong. The following audio interview with Allyn Rickett outlines the revolutionary thought reform process of study, criticism, and labor, which were responsible for his political transformation. The interview demonstrates that we have reason to expect similar successes with many of the First World reactionaries through the ideological remolding of proletarian dictatorship.
All right, Dr. Ricketts, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today in Amherst, and I was hoping that you would share some of your experiences in China and thoughts since then with our listeners for Undercurrents. So why don't we kind of start at the beginning? Could you tell us when you were in China and why you went there? What were you doing?
Well, I should start out by saying that during World War II, I was a Japanese language officer with Naval Intelligence, and I was stationed with the Marine Corps. After the war, my wife and I went to the University of Pennsylvania to study Chinese, and while there, we received Fulbright grants to go to China, and this was in 1948. So we arrived in China just before the collapse of the Kuomintang. So we lived for a short time under the Kuomintang. Well, we found our Fulbright grants were useless because of the inflation. And so we took jobs at a university, sharing one position to teach English while we also studied Chinese there. And we were there for 2.5 years. And then it became clear that, well, we were what you might call slightly imperialistic in our attitude. Actually, we had been quite favorably impressed by the communists when they came in. But when we began to see signs down with American imperialism and all that sort of thing, we began to feel kind of on the spot, and it sort of changed our attitude from one of, well, sort of admiration, actually, and support to one of at least fairly, I think, repressed but definite hostility.
I'm curious, why were you originally impressed?
Well, when we arrived in China, the situation was just unbelievably bad. We stepped off the boat in Shanghai to find ourselves surrounded by children, many of those children carrying children, many of them deliberately maimed so they'd be more appealing as beggars. And it was just that way all the way through. I mean, when we arrived in Peking, we opened our door one morning to find a man stretched out, starved to death on our doorstep. And this was the common sort of thing. The situation was just desperate. On top of that, the Kuomintang was so corrupt and so brutal that you'd turn anybody off that had any sense of fairness or justice or anything like that. When the communists came in, I had a personal experience with them when I was going through the lines with trying to bring back mail and money and so on back to the university from the city. And I got caught in a barrage, and I had to abandon my bicycle. But I took my briefcase, and I managed to get close to the lines, and the communists waved me over. And they were very friendly, and I was obviously the first foreigner that many of them have ever seen, and I think the first American that any of them had seen. And they laughed and joked, and they were talking about showing me their Tommy guns and saying wonderful weapons they were, and how America made good weapons, and what a good supply Sergeant Jankashek was, because all of these weapons had come from him. And they want to know what was in my briefcase, and I opened it up. Well, I had about $50 silver in it. The moment they saw the money, they closed it back up and handed it to me. They couldn't get away with it fast enough. And if those had been Kuomintang troops, I might not be here today, because I could have been just disappeared. They also, I told them I had to abandon my bicycle out in the field, and it had some cans of meat tied to the back, and I asked them to inform the peasants about it, and tell the peasants I would give a reward if they'd bring the bicycle back. Well, no sooner I had said that than 3 of them took off across the field under fire and came bouncing back with my bicycle. Well, a couple of cans of the meat had fallen off, and they would have gone back after that if it hadn't been for, they put my foot down. And they wouldn't accept any reward. And what they had to say sounded like, sort of Boy Scout on my honor sort of thing. They said, no, if they wouldn't even accept a cigarette. And they said if they did, they were the People's Liberation Army. They were fighting for the revolution. And if they did anything like that, this would reflect on the revolution. And it was, it was hard to believe. It was so simple and so, it was just made you feel good about human beings. And that was but I saw it everywhere. Where the high morale and honesty and so on of the communist troops at that time.
So I would imagine there was quite a feeling of elation amongst the people in general when the transfer of power happened.
Not necessarily. Of course, some people were very happy, particularly the younger students. A lot of other people had great concerns because they had been, showered with anti-communist propaganda. Some of it ranging, when the communists came in, they were going to communize all the women and your wives and all that sort of thing. And, there was a lot of that. But there was also fear they might get executed or they'd be oppressed and, and go to jail or something. And people just... But on the other hand, as somebody said, it couldn't get any worse. That was sort of the feeling. And then, after the communists were in, and you began to see that they were really attempting to doing something, that they went out of their way to avoid putting any burden on people and so on, the attitude began to change, and it changed very rapidly to support. One of the things that happened was that there was unbelievable inflation. Probably only Germany after World War II, or after World War I, could equal the inflation that went on there. To give you some idea, when we arrived in China in August of 1948, there had been a new currency introduced at 4 to 1. By May of the following year, it was up to 12 million to 1. Well, that devastates a society because money is, you have to spend all your time coping. You can't teach, you can't study, you can't do anything. You're just coping, staying alive.